It's roughly 90,000 years ago, and someone by the fire is about to say something that isn't true. You can't see this moment. Nobody wrote it down. There was no writing yet, not for another 80-odd thousand years. But it happened. Somewhere in some firelit circle that looked a lot like a very early, very smoky group chat. One person told another person something that didn't happen, and the other person believed it. Maybe it was small. Maybe it was, I saw a lion near the river. We should hunt somewhere else when there was no lion. Just a hunter who didn't feel like walking that far. Maybe it was bigger. I didn't take the extra share. It wasn't me who let the fire go out. We don't know, and honestly, we'll never know exactly which. What we do know is this. Someone somewhere told the first lie, and it probably wasn't even in words. A look held a beat too long. A gesture that pointed the wrong way, on purpose. A face arranged into something calm, on top of something that wasn't calm at all. And whoever it was, they got away with it. Or they didn't. And someone caught the mismatch between what was said and what was true, and a very old, very human argument happened around that fire, the kind you've probably had yourself, minus the fire. Either way, something had shifted. A tool existed now that hadn't existed the day before. Not fire, not a spear, something quieter and arguably more dangerous. Here's the thing. Lying feels like a modern character flaw, something you're supposed to grow out of, like thumb-sucking or believing in the tooth fairy. But turns out it's one of the oldest tricks your brain ever learned to run older than language, older than fire maybe. Stay with me, because the real story here isn't about morality at all. It's about what your brain had to become before it could ever bend the truth in the first place. Let's start close to home. You've probably lied today. Not a big one, nobody's asking you to confess anything. Diary studies going back decades, where regular adults carry a notebook and log every social interaction they have, consistently find that most people tell somewhere around 1 or 2 lies a day. I love it. Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm just swamped. Can we push this? No, you didn't wake me up. Tiny, forgettable, almost automatic. And here's where it gets interesting. Your brain doesn't experience these as some special, effortful skill. It just does it smoothly, like breathing or catching a ball someone throws without warning. Which is strange if you actually stop and think about what's involved. To lie well, you have to hold 2 versions of reality in your head at the same time, what actually happened, and what you want the other person to believe happened, and keep the 2 from colliding out loud in real time, while also reading their face for whether it's working. That's not a small computational task. Your brain runs it anyway, every day, without asking your permission. So the question worth actually sitting with isn't why do people lie? It's how did a brain ever get built that could do this at all, this smoothly, this young? So let's go back to the start, or as close to a start as the evidence will actually let us get. Nobody can point to a fossil and say, here, this skull, this is the first liar. That kind of precision doesn't exist, and honestly, anyone who tells you otherwise on the internet is guessing, dressing up a story as a discovery. Bones don't record intentions. They can't tell you what someone meant when they said something. What we can trace, instead, is the machinery. The parts of the brain in the social world that had to exist first before deception could ever show up as an option at all. It's a bit like trying to date the invention of the joke. You'll never find the first one, but you can absolutely trace when the brain became capable of understanding that words could mean something other than exactly what they say. And here's the genuinely useful part. We don't have to dig it up. We can watch that machinery build itself not in the deep past, but in real time, in basically every human being alive right now, starting, weirdly enough, in your own living room or your sister's or your neighbor's, anytime a toddler decides the couch cushions ate the last cookie. Here's the first beat, and it's the part that gets me every time I think about it. Researchers who study early childhood development, a well-known program out of a Canadian university, has spent well over a decade on this specific question, have run a simple, almost sneaky test. Put a toy behind a child. Tell them not to peek. Leave the room. Watch on a hidden camera. Come back and ask what happened. 2-year-olds peek. Almost all of them. Something like 80% across hundreds of kids tested. Kids are kids. But here's the part that should stop you. When you ask what happened, a good chunk of the 2-year-olds who peeked, roughly a third of them, will look you dead in the eye and say they didn't. Now, here's the twist, and it's the twist that changes the whole meaning of the story. This isn't your toddler quietly becoming a criminal mastermind. Researchers who track these same kids over years have found something almost backwards. The kids who start lying earlier tend to show stronger cognitive development overall, not weaker. Better working memory, better self-control, better what researchers call theory of mind, the ability to understand that another person's head contains different information than yours does, that they don't automatically know what you know. Basically, a 2-year-old can't lie convincingly until they understand you're not a mind reader. Once that clicks, usually somewhere around 3 or 4, lying stops being an accident and starts being a strategy. By 7 or 8, kids can keep a lie consistent across multiple separate conversations, days apart, without the story slip. So the punchline here is genuinely a little unsettling if you sit with it long enough. Learning to lie is a developmental milestone, right up there with walking and talking and figuring out that the dog is not, in fact, a very large cat. It's not a character flaw showing up early. It's a mind discovering, for the first time in its short existence, that other minds exist at all, separate ones, fallible ones, ones that can be wrong about what's true. And once a brain knows that, it can't unknow it. Which brings us to the second beat, and this one goes back a lot further than any toddler with chocolate on their face. Researchers studying comparative primate cognition, going back to careful observational work through the 1980s and 90s, documented something they started calling tactical deception animals deliberately misleading other members of their own species. Not predators, not prey, their own group. A subordinate chimpanzee spots food. Instead of alerting the group the way it normally would, it stays quiet, wanders off in the wrong direction to lead everyone else away, waits, then quietly doubles back alone once the coast is clear. That's not a reflex. That's not instinct in the simple, automatic sense. That's planning built entirely around a model of what someone else does and doesn't currently know. And here's the detail that should genuinely stop you for a second. Across different primate species, the amount of documented tactical deception tracks pretty closely with the size of the neocortex, the part of the brain most associated with complex, flexible thinking. Bigger, more socially complicated brains, more deception, not more violence, not more aggression, more lying, which tells you something uncomfortable. Deception isn't a bug that shows up when a brain goes wrong. It's a feature that shows up when a brain gets sophisticated enough to run it, which means whatever is happening in a 2-year-old figuring out a theory of mind for the first time, it's an echo, a very recent echo, of something that was already running in the primate family tree long, long before anyone stood upright, let alone opened their mouth and spoke a sentence. Here's the third beat, and this is where the origin switch in the title actually flips. Gesture-based deception, the fake alarm call, the wrong direction wander, the held stare is powerful, but it's limited. It can only lie about what's happening right here, right now, in front of both parties. A chimpanzee can mislead its troop about where the fruit is this afternoon. It cannot lie about what happened last winter, or what might happen next spring, or what someone else supposedly said behind your back. Language changes that completely. The moment early humans could talk about things that weren't physically present a threat from 3 valleys over, a promise made yesterday, a plan for next season deception stopped being limited to the here and now. It could travel, could be about anything, anywhere, anytime, told to someone who wasn't even there to check. Which is frankly a little unsettling once you actually picture it. Language didn't just give humans the ability to cooperate at a massive scale, coordinating hunts and building alliances across whole valleys. The exact same upgrade also gave humans the ability to lie at a massive scale about things nobody could immediately verify. You don't get the storytelling, complex society version of humanity without also getting the gossip, rumor, and fabrication version running on the same wiring at the same time. So the honest answer to when did humans first start lying is really 2 answers stitched together. The capacity, the theory of mind, the tactical thinking was already sitting in the primate brain long before language existed. But the moment language arrived, lying stopped being a local, in-the-moment trick and became something that could outrun the person who told it, spreading through a group faster than anyone could check it against reality. That's the actual origin switch, not the first lie that could travel. And here's the part that actually reframes the entire story, the part that took the longest for researchers to land on. There's a theoretical model published in a peer-reviewed evolutionary biology journal, built from game theory plus decades of primate field data, and it argues something almost backwards from what you'd expect. It suggests that convincing deception didn't evolve despite cooperation. It evolved because of it. Think about it this way. Lying only works if the other person's default setting is to believe you. And that default only exists in a species that survives by trusting and cooperating with each other, constantly sharing food after a hunt, sharing warnings about predators, sharing the location of water during a dry season. Early humans who didn't trust each other at all couldn't have built the kind of tight, dependent social groups that got our species through, well, basically everything a species needs to survive. But the moment you build a species around trust, you've also built a resource that can be quietly exploited. Every honest signal, every I promise, every trust me, is also a door. And a door that opens for truth opens just as easily for something else wearing truth's face. So lying isn't the opposite of cooperation sitting across the table from it. It's cooperation's shadow. You genuinely do not get one without eventually getting the other, whether you like that or not. Honestly, respect. That's a genuinely elegant, genuinely uncomfortable piece of engineering, evolved with no engineer in the room. But wait, and this is worth asking directly, because it's the obvious hole in the story. If lying is this useful, this baked into the machinery, why isn't everyone constantly lying about everything all the time? Why does honesty still run most human interactions most of the time in most places? And here's the answer, and it's the part that actually keeps the whole system standing upright. Lying only stays useful if it stays rare. If everyone lied constantly, nobody would believe anybody about anything. And the entire trust economy, the thing that makes cooperation worth anything at all, quietly collapses under its own weight. So the same evolutionary pressure that built the ability to lie also had to build something to keep it in check. Reputation, memory, social cost, the quiet dread of getting caught. Most people, most of the time, tell the truth. Not because lying is impossible for them, because a world full of constant liars is a world where lying as a strategy stops working at all. It cancels itself out. It's not that we became a species of liars. It's that we became a species capable of lying, living inside a system that most of the time punishes doing it too much. And this is where it stops being a fun fact about toddlers and chimpanzees and starts being personal. Because that same machinery, the theory of mind, the trust economy, the constant quiet calculation of what someone else does and doesn't currently know is running in you right now today, whether you notice it or not. Every white lie you've told this week used the exact same cognitive hardware that a 2-year-old had to build for the very first time, and that some primate ancestor had to build even earlier than that, in a forest, with no words at all. You're not doing anything new. You're not even doing anything especially clever. You're running software that's been in beta for a very, very long time, quietly patched by every generation that came before you. Let that sit for a second. Here's one more thing worth knowing, because it changes how you might think about the next lie you catch someone in or the next one you tell. Not everyone runs this software the same way. Some people are worse at reading the signs of deception than they think most adults, tested in labs, do barely better than chance at spotting a stranger's lie just from watching their face, no matter how confident they feel about their own lie-detecting instincts. And some people lie more than the daily average, not because they're broken, but because, for whatever reason in their own life, honesty stopped being the strategy that worked best for them. At some point, for some reason a study can't see from the outside. There's also a version of this that isn't selfish at all. Researchers who study what they call prosocial lying find that a huge share of everyday lies aren't about gaining anything. They're about protecting someone else's feelings, smoothing over a moment, keeping a relationship intact. I love the gift. You look great. Even children, by around 5 or 6, start telling this kind of lie deliberately, weighing someone else's feelings against the plain truth and choosing the feelings, which is honestly a strange kind of kindness to build out of the same machinery that also builds manipulation. Same tool, wildly different intentions depending entirely on the hand holding it. It's worth sitting with that for a second too before you decide how you feel about any of this. The machinery is the same in everyone. What each person does with it is not. That part genuinely isn't something a 2-year-old test or a chimpanzee study can fully answer. That part is just being human, one relationship at a time. So picture that fire again. 90,000 years ago, someone tells someone else something that isn't quite true. It's small, it's forgettable. Nobody writes it down because nobody can write yet, not for a very long time. And yet it works. It changes what the other person believes and does and feels. And it works because underneath everything, that other person trusted them enough to listen in the first place. No questions asked, no verification possible. Just trust doing what trust does. That's not a flaw in the story of us. That's the story of us. Not deception layered awkwardly on top of trust, added later, like a bug someone forgot to patch. Trust and deception, built from the very same material, at the very same time, by the very same pressure, in the very same fragile, cooperative, occasionally dishonest species. You lied today, probably. Small, forgettable, automatic. Maybe you don't even remember doing it, the way you don't remember most of the small, ordinary things your brain runs without asking. And now you know what had to happen deep in the machinery a very long time ago, in a toddler's mind, in a chimpanzee's calculation, around a fire with no name for what was happening yet, just so you could do that without even thinking about it once. Same world, different lens. If this is the kind of thing your brain quietly does without ever asking your permission, there's more of it waiting. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.